He walked in for a routine business lunch, but somewhere between the aroma of brewing coffee and the clatter of plates, time itself froze. The man who had it all, the cars, the mansions, the companies, stood motionless before a simple apron and a face he knew better than his own reflection. And beneath the worn fabric of the uniform, a new life was growing. Sometimes it isn't the past that comes back to you. It's the truth finally finding its way home. The sky over Chicago that Tuesday was overcast, painting the city in a lazy shade of grey. Ethan Cole crossed the polished stone street of the financial district, stepping into a small bistro with an unassuming facade. There were no luxury reservations or waiters in white gloves, just worn wooden tables and the comforting aroma of home-cooked food. He didn't usually frequent places like this, but his friend and business partner Mark had insisted it was the perfect spot to discuss the company's new acquisition. Ethan, dressed in an impeccable suit and wearing a watch that cost more than most people's cars, walked through the door and felt the immediate contrast. The walls were adorned with old photographs, and the sound of silverware on plates created a melody of everyday life. As he made his way to their reserved table, he scanned the room out of sheer habit. Some patrons were having a hurried lunch. Others seemed to have all the time in the world. Mark was already waiting in a corner, a stack of documents beside him. Ethan gave a slight nod, ready to dive into business, until something at the back of the restaurant caught his eye. A woman, her hair tied back simply, her hands moving deftly, was weaving through the tables, balancing a tray. She didn't see him. She didn't even glance in his direction, but he recognized her in an instant, as if no time had passed at all. Clara Vance, his ex-wife. For a second, the world seemed to shrink. The noise around him faded into a distant hum, and Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't just seeing her there, it was the discreet, almost hidden detail that changed everything. Beneath her apron, the unmistakable curve of an advanced pregnancy. Clara moved with the precision of someone who knew every inch of that dining room. She greeted regulars with a restrained but genuine smile. There was a lightness to her movements, even while carrying the visible weight of her pregnancy. Ethan, frozen for a few seconds, fought against the avalanche of memories that threatened to overwhelm him. They had separated 3 years ago. The end hadn't been peaceful. Harsh words, accusations, and a silence that was never truly explained. They hadn't seen each other since. He, immersed in business, had built even more wealth. She, as far as he knew, had left their upscale neighborhood and vanished from his world. Jessica, Clara's co-worker, emerged from the kitchen carrying a stack of clean plates. She joked with her about not overdoing it, and Clara responded with a quick smile, offering no details. It was as if she was hiding more than just the pregnancy, as if she were guarding her own heart. In the opposite corner, a man with a loud voice and arrogant manner, Arthur, was complaining impatiently about the delay in his order. He wore expensive clothes, but had a look that made it clear. He didn't see waiters, he saw servants. Ethan noticed how Clara tensed slightly as she passed near him, avoiding any contact. Mark tried to draw his attention to the figures on the tablet, but Ethan couldn't focus. There was something unsettling about seeing Clara here, so far from the world they had once shared, and even more disturbing was the silent question pulsing in his mind. Who was the father of that child? The metallic clatter of falling silverware shattered the room's murmur. Clara, trying to balance a tray with 3 steaming plates, was bumped by Arthur, who stood up without looking where he was going. Sauce spattered lightly on his shirt sleeve. "Watch what you're doing," he snapped, as if she were the one at fault. "What is this, a restaurant or a 3-ring circus?" Embarrassed, Clara apologized calmly. She grabbed a napkin and tried to clean the fabric, but he recoiled in disdain, as if her mere touch was an offense. "Don't tell me you're going to charge me extra for this experience," he said, emphasizing the word with irony. A few customers chuckled softly. Jessica appeared to help her, but Clara gave a quick gesture, asking her not to intervene. There was a hardened glint in her eyes, as if this wasn't the first time she'd endured something like this. Still, She maintained her composure, picked up the plates, rearranged the tray, and continued her work. Ethan watched her every move. He recognized that self-control, the same she had displayed during the worst moments of their marriage. The same he, out of pride, had once misinterpreted as coldness. From his vantage point, he also saw another detail. When Clara turned to grab an order from the counter, she discreetly rested a hand on her belly and took a deep breath, as if holding in a profound exhaustion. It was clear she was trying to hide the pregnancy from customers, perhaps to avoid comments or pity. Ethan clenched his fists on the table. He wasn't the type of man to be easily shaken, but that scene had hit him like a blow that pierces your chest without warning. The lunch proceeded in a strange haze. Mark talked about contracts and projections, but the words reached Ethan as distant, muffled sounds. His eyes kept drifting back to Clara, who moved through the room as if nothing had happened. But the second act of the humiliation came quickly. Arthur, dissatisfied with his replacement dish, raised his voice intentionally, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "I've been waiting 20 minutes, he exaggerated, "and now you bring me the wrong thing again. Do you think I have nothing better to do?" Clara tried to explain that the order was correct, but he cut her off. "Don't talk back to me. Get the manager, and please, learn to take an order properly before you serve anyone else." Those words echoed through the room, cutting the atmosphere like shattering glass. Some customers looked away, embarrassed. Jessica rushed to intervene, but the manager, a short, anxious man, got there first. He apologized to Arthur and, in a tone too low for others to hear, suggested to Clara that she be more careful to avoid problems. She nodded in silence. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She just turned, walked back to the kitchen, and continued her work, as if she were immune. But Ethan noticed, the moment she passed through the narrow hallway by the register, her shoulders slumped slightly, and she took a breath like someone swallowing something bitter. In that instant, Ethan remembered the day he decided to leave her. He remembered their final conversation, filled with hasty accusations and truths he never bothered to investigate. He had been certain back then that Clara had cheated on him. Today, looking at this woman who held onto her dignity even under public humiliation, he felt a painful doubt take root. Without a word, he stood up. Mark tried to stop him, but he just said he needed some air. He walked out of the restaurant with firm steps, but his chest felt heavy. The chill of the street couldn't cool the uncomfortable heat burning inside him. Have you ever witnessed someone being publicly humiliated and felt frozen, unsure if you should intervene? If this scene also left you with a lump in your throat, type yes in the comments. It's how I'll know this story has found someone who understands the weight of silence. Ethan spent that night wide awake. Clara's face, Arthur's words, and the weight she carried in her belly swirled together like loose pieces of a puzzle he had never tried to assemble. For the first time in years, numbers and meetings didn't occupy his mind, only questions. The next morning, he cancelled his appointments and asked a trusted assistant to discreetly investigate what had happened to her since the separation. The report arrived 2 days later. There were no scandals, no proof of an affair. On the contrary, Clara had left their neighborhood after her mother's death, selling what little she had to pay off old debts he never knew existed. She had worked in small shops, then as a waitress. No lawsuits, no dependency on anyone. As for the pregnancy, it was recent. The child's father wasn't mentioned in any records. The assistant noted that neighbors just said she preferred not to talk about it. Ethan felt a mix of relief and shame. Relief to know the image he held of her was distorted. Shame to realize he had never tried to confirm the truth before judging her. In the following days, he started visiting the restaurant, always at different times, sitting at discreet tables. He watched from a distance, unnoticed, and saw Clara working with the same quiet composure. Every tray she served seemed like a small battle won. It was then that he decided to act, but in a way that wouldn't expose her. He prepaid 6 months of her apartment's rent through an intermediary, under the guise of a local assistance program. He also arranged for a private doctor to provide her with full prenatal care at no cost. He didn't want her to immediately connect the help to him. More than seeking redemption, Ethan wanted to ensure she had the security to get through this time, even if it meant he remained an invisible presence. As he orchestrated these silent gestures, he realized he wasn't seeking a reunion to repair his own image, but to find, somehow, the dignity he had lost by leaving her. Deep down, he knew the moment would come, and when it did, he wanted to be ready to look her in the eyes, without looking away. Almost a month later, Ethan returned to the bistro on a rainy afternoon. This time, he wasn't with Mark, nor was he wearing the impeccably tailored suit. He chose simple clothes, a dark jacket, and deliberately left an umbrella at the door. He sat at a table near the counter where he could see her without the distance feeling like a wall. Clara appeared minutes later, her hair still tied back, the same worn apron on. When she saw him, it took her a few seconds to recognize him. There was no smile, no coldness, just a look that mixed surprise with caution. "Good afternoon. Can I take your order?" she asked, maintaining a professional tone. "Of course," he replied with a calm he didn't feel inside. He ordered something simple, just to prolong her presence there. The conversation was limited to the necessary. No mention of the past, no personal questions. But there were silent pauses that said more than any words could. When she walked away to place the order, he took a deep breath and discreetly pulled an envelope from his pocket, placing it under his napkin. It wasn't cash, but a receipt for the rent paid through the end of the year and a short note. "So you don't have to worry about a roof over your head while you prepare for what truly matters." No signature. Clara returned, served the dish, and didn't notice the envelope at first. Only as he was getting up to leave did she pick up the napkin and feel the paper. She looked toward the door, but Ethan was already on the sidewalk, opening his umbrella under the light rain. There was no wave, no explanation, just a reunion that ended as it began, in silence. But this time the silence wasn't heavy. It carried something that, perhaps, could one day become peace. 2 days later, Ethan was driving down the restaurant street when he saw her. Clara was leaving her shift early, shielding herself with an umbrella too small for the rain that was falling. She carried a grocery bag and, for a moment, paused to adjust her hand on her belly. He parked across the street without her seeing him. He watched as she opened the door to the modest apartment building where she lived and disappeared inside. The urge to cross the street was strong, but he held back. It wasn't the time to seek conversation, nor to hear explanations or offer his own. What he needed to do, he had already done. As he waited for the light to change, the building's door opened again. Clara appeared on a first-floor balcony, holding a warm mug. She didn't seem to be looking for anyone, just watching the rain. Then she smiled, a slight, brief, but genuine smile. Ethan didn't know if that gesture had anything to do with him, but he didn't need to know. That smile was enough to understand that somehow she was better. The light turned green. He drove on without looking back, because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in returning to the past, but in ensuring that the future is less unjust. Some stories don't close with hugs or apologies. They end the moment we understand what we truly did and decide to act so the damage doesn't continue. Ethan realized that pride is a comfortable prison. It protects you from embarrassment, but prevents you from seeing the truth. He spent years believing a convenient version of events, lacking the courage to revisit what happened. Until chance, or fate, put Clara back in his path, carrying not just a new life, but also the silent proof that he had been wrong. Justice, in this case, wasn't loud. There was no spectacle, no reconciliation for an audience. There was only a man who finally understood that making amends isn't about erasing the past, but about ensuring the present is less cruel. And maybe that's the rarest form of redemption, transforming guilt into care and then moving on. If this story moved you in any way, leave a like, It's the best way for me to know it's worth continuing to bring stories like this. Let me know what city you're watching from in the comments. I promise I'll read as many as I can. And if you believe in the power of narratives that touch you and make you think, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We still have so much to share together. Don't go just yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've left on the screen, and I'll see you in the next video.